you everybody who's here with us in person. Of course, we're also recording because we'll be sending out some of the video afterwards. But I always like to, for our guests, to start with just a little bit about Sunstone. I hold in my hand a Sunstone, and this Sunstone embodies everything about our company. My ancestors, the Vikings, they would set out on these ventures to unknown places, and they used the Sunstone to help them navigate sometimes when they got lost at sea. And you hopefully all can relate that sometimes you're embarking on a new venture, or sometimes we help investors find great startups, and they need a little bit of navigational help. They need to find help finding their way. And so the Sunstone is a symbol of that, but also hopefully you all, before you leave here today, take a Sunstone with you. I always recommend taking two so that you can then give a Sunstone to somebody else. The P3 strategy series is something that we've just started this year. This is the 10th anniversary of Sunstone, which started in 2015 in the city of Long Beach. And we're gonna have speakers today who are gonna be talking about a project in Long Beach, one of the largest municipal public-private partnerships in the country. So we'll get to sort of reconnect to our roots in some ways. But this is our 10th year anniversary since that first year of Sunstone. And this is also a year of transformation. So we're introducing many of our new topics and themes through these Friday strategy series. Every other week we'll talk about what public-private partnerships are and how you can invest public and private capital to get things built, big things, and in this case today, a big project for a local government. So with that, I will actually ask our guest speaker, Jeff Fullerton, who's an expert in P3s. He has built many projects in his career, I think around $6 billion worth of public-private partnerships. So he is an expert, and we're very fortunate to have him here on the Sunstone stage. So Jeff Fullerton, do you want to take the microphone? And then we'll invite up Pat West when you're done with your presentation, who was the city manager. He was the chief executive officer on the government side, who built this project, which is now a major legacy of the city of Long Beach. So with that, we'll start with Jeff. You can take it away.
Great. Oh, hey, thanks, John. Appreciate that. And yeah, so honored to have Pat here today. So I'm going to kind of go really quickly through this deal. It was a long time in the making, but Pat was key to it. So we want to get into some, great discussion and questions and answers. So bear with me if I flip through this quickly, but certainly hold your questions to the end, and we're happy to dive into any part of this that you guys find interesting. So just again, start with an overview. And one of the key things about this project was, the city came to us and said, can you build this new building for no more than it cost us to maintain our old one? That was a really tough ask, but it's something we call a cost neutral equation. So we'll go into how we did that. This is kind of a key part of the presentation. And then we'll kind of talk a little bit about what P3 is and what some of the best practices are. So that's how we've got it organized today. Quickly from an introduction standpoint, as John mentioned, I'm Jeff Fullerton. I've done a bunch of public-private partnerships, about 18 million square feet across $6.5 billion worth of projects. And Pat West here will be joining me in a second, was the former city manager at Long Beach, and has a long municipal career as a community development director and city manager at Paramount and other things as well. So again, project overview. So quickly, this is about a $520 million project. It involved a new city hall, a new main library, a 4.5-acre park, and a new headquarters for the Port of Long Beach. Those two buildings housed a little over 500 people, and so it was a big project for the city and much needed public infrastructure. We financed it with a public-private partnership we call Design, Build, Finance, Operate, and Maintain. So that's a DBFOM structure, and as we'll talk about in a bit, there's lots of different public-private partnerships. But this one involved investing private equity into public infrastructure, which was a unique thing. It's not unique around the world. It's done a lot in Canada. It's done a lot in other Commonwealth countries around the world. But it was one of the first deals in the US after the Long Beach courthouse, which was really one of the first of its kind to be done there as well. because of, and we'll talk about it a little bit, but significant risks around not having a building available for your use. In other words, consequential damages if you can't get into the building. So the private equity underwrites that consequential damage piece. Structure perspective. Here's just a rendering of what the project looks like at its completion. So again, we've got the library down at the bottom, the park in front. There's a piece where the old city hall stood that's going to be apartments that are now still under development, and then the new city hall and port headquarters off to the left of the screen there. This kind of illustrates the phasing of it. Again, we had the old city hall. You see the old tower standing there. That was a building, had some seismic deficiencies, was going to fall down in a big earthquake, creating some public safety concerns. The city studied it about 5 different times, and every different evaluation of that seismic study was just a little more morbid than the last in terms of how it was all going to crumble down on you. So we took that old building in trade, if you will, as part of the deal structure, allowing the city to hit that cost neutral equation. So from a phasing standpoint, we built the new civic facilities, the new park and library, then we tore down the old city hall and are building the new apartments in the middle of the block. This is what the project looks like at completion, and we'll just flip through a couple of quick photos there of the beautiful new building. Entrance with some public art and a video wall in behind it. Modern, efficient workspaces that are all laid out in a very configurable and flexible fashion. That allows for just productivity increases. That's not something we normally measure, but it's like really important when people are coming to work that they're productive and feel comfortable in their space. A new council chambers that improved a lot of the functionality over the old building. And this is a picture of the public park, which we programmed as a sports park with a lot of activation components and ability to do events. Stage in front of the main library, which is at the back of the park there. So again, it solved a lot of problems for the city in terms of activating that park, so it wasn't just full of homeless, but provided a great community amenity. And the main library was another great community amenity. We built that on top of an existing parking structure and a timber frame building, and it's a beautiful 90,000 square foot main library in Long Beach that you should all go out and see one day. This is the interior of the space. Again, you can see that woodwork, and that's the main clips on the project. So I know you guys are all finance people, so we're going to dive into the numbers a little bit. How did we do it? What's our cost neutral equation, if you will? Well, there are really a few things. Again, the city was looking for us to build a new main library and all this program for no more than it cost them to maintain their old one. So we leveraged this credit to the city. We brought the port in as a key tenant, so they were paying some rent and helped us with that. And then we also monetized the excess land in the site. Like I said, we took and traded that old city hall that you see standing on the left-hand side of the frame. So between really these following components, like energy savings, operating cost savings, efficient space, the city's good credit, like deferred maintenance, and efficient financing and the use of the excess lands, those things all added up to allow us to do it. And this is kind of what the numbers look like at the end of the day. On the right is the old city hall cost. That's what they were spending to be in their old building. It worked out to about $12.6 million a year, and that was our original target. What they weren't accounting for was the fact that their building was falling down, and if they did nothing, they'd have another $6.7 million a year of fixing that deferred maintenance. So their costs were going to go up regardless, and that turned into $19.3 million. The new payment, which includes all the operations, all the maintenance, all the life cycle replacements, new roofs, chillers, all that kind of stuff, was $14.7 million, and their new energy bill is about $500,000 a year. So in the end of the day, we got them a new city hall, saved them $4 million a year. They have guaranteed uptime, which means like if you can't open the building, for example, it's like we pay a $65,000 a day penalty. So that gives you great motivation to make sure everything's running up and that it's not, and something people are worried about that's impacting their daily lives from a standpoint of having a space available to do their work. And it also had like turnkey delivery, right? So, and guaranteed hand back. So we hand back the facility in 85% in new condition. So that's just a little bit about the project. We're going to dive into a little bit more later in the Q&A, but I wanted to frame that, how do we get here, and how can other cities and other people do this? What does a public-private partnership look like? So just a couple of best practices and some other projects. So really I like to talk about it with like, why do you need public-private partnership? Who are you trying to partner with? What are you trying to partner for, and when should you do it? So under the first question, like every public-private partnership drives a little bit of a different need. So in the case of this one, which is the Long Beach courthouse that I mentioned earlier, they had a problem where like ceiling tiles are falling down and elevators didn't work, and you couldn't have whole court in session, and so you had to reschedule. And rescheduling a court date is really, really expensive, right? It goes out months, you've got to get it in the calendar, you're housing prisoners, you're bringing people back, and then cases are unresolved, which is really, from a public service standpoint, not a great thing. This new building, the judges that work there tell me they're resolving cases there faster than in any other courthouse in the state, and part of it is because, that's anecdotal, but part of it is because people come to work, there's not a facility problem, it's designed to have efficiency and throughput, it's designed with redundancies in mind, but again, their reason for doing it was the consequence of damages they face if they cannot use the facility. So that uptime guarantee was a critical need for their asset. In the case of two other projects I worked on, one was UCSF's the Neuroscience Center. We had 3 Nobel Prize winning laureates that are in there fighting over lab space. And Amtrak, the William H. Gray 30th Street station, one of the 3rd busiest train station in the country that runs the Northeast Corridor. So both of them, what they were really interested in was turnkey delivery, getting an asset built on time and on budget and having uptime during the process. They had experienced a lot of delays in either case, and so their partnerships were structured a little differently. In the case of both Long Beach and a project that I worked on in Denver, they were looking for leveraging private sector resources. How do we get these assets to help pay for themselves and like lower our overall cost of occupancy, get back to that cost neutral equation? And I mean, that's really where we start to think about like, what is it you're looking to get out of a public-private partnership? Because the public sector has resources and the private sector has different resources. And what are you bringing together? So this graph just kind of shows like kind of an idea of a risk continuum. So on one end, turnkey design, build, finance, operate, maintain, really is an easy button. That's the path that Long Beach City Hall chose. On the other side, you can control and do everything yourself and parse it all up. And both of those have appropriate places in the market, and there's kind of everything in between. But it's really about, once you've defined your goals, then what is it you're looking to get out of leveraging the resources of the private sector to put together a good partnership. And then when? Bringing in a partner earlier on, obviously it gives you great feedback. Later on, introduces more competitive tension into a process. So, there are trade-offs in that, and really that's part of how every one of these needs to be thought through in terms of where you would structure it. And, the last and maybe most important thing is who are you partnering with, right? So you always want to have a good partner, and you can get it in any structure, but, how you're looking for finding those partners is more art than science, and certainly track record helps, and having the skill sets that you're really looking to contract with. And so, that really, again, was the end of kind of my quick presentation. So I thought maybe we'll bring Pat up and we'll get into the nitty gritty and the interesting part.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff, and thank you for giving us the background and a couple specific projects. But let's ask an actual customer. Let's ask a CEO of a public agency, the city manager of Long Beach. From your perspective, Pat, why was this successful? What did it do for you as a city manager and as a city? And maybe what was going on from your perspective that led you to enter into this kind of model that's not that common really in local government?
Well, for us, and thanks for the invitation, I was happy to be here. This all started for us with Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans. When that happened, the government made a mandate that everyone in America, all the big cities, had to evaluate their facilities and how safe are they given what just happened in New Orleans. So I wasn't at Long Beach at the time, but they hired a seismic person, and they came in and said, wow, this sucks. The building's gonna like collapse. And then I got hired, and so that's happened around the buildings. It turned out that the building wouldn't pancake, but the pillars on the side, it was a brutalism architecture, would peel apart, and you'd have to live in place. So you could, if you're below the 6th floor, you could probably get out, but if you're above the 6th floor, you'd have to live in place for who knows how long. So you'd stack power bars and toilets and water and stuff. And then I became city manager in 2007, so then that really became my problem. So I'm looking at, oh my gosh, what's gonna happen here? If we know that if a big earthquake, this could fall, and people are gonna die, and I could be personally liable. And our city council, the electeds, imagine you're an elected official at your city, no one likes to do city halls. They're monuments to themselves. Everybody wants to do streets. I want to do parks and community centers and fix streets, and I want to build a hospital, I want to do low-income housing. I'm not gonna do a city hall. In fact, California is littered with former city managers who built city halls and got fired. So anyhow, lucky for us, the courthouse happened right next door, and Jeff and his team were doing the courthouse, and I was also in charge of the redevelopment agency, and we got involved in that. That's where I got to meet Jeff and our entire team, because we had some property that the courthouse could expand to. So that happened, and we found out about this DBFOM process, and we latched onto it. And later, our city council still didn't believe how bad it was going to be, so they wanted another seismic expert. And this person said, "Oh no, it's worse than you ever thought. It's going to pancake, and everybody's going to die." And then the library as well is going to pancake, and everybody's going to die. And the council still wasn't excited about that, because they'd want to fix streets and parks and stuff like that. So they ended up telling me that if you could find a way to do this so we don't have to raise taxes or go to the voters or do anything on the ballot, then yeah, we're in. So that's when we really got serious. I had some really genius people working with me, working for me. This guy's one of them, John Keisler. And then we reached out to Jeff and his team, and that was Mike Conway and Amy Bodek, and put together this scenario that wouldn't cost us any taxes, it wouldn't cost us any money, it's within our budget, and there's a lot of other things to talk about as you go forward, but it was with our budget, and it was easy for me to go on the road, on the stump, and the rubber chicken circuit, and talk to the Chamber of Commerce, talk to the Kiwanis, talk to the Optimist Group, talk to all the homeowner groups, and tell the story on how we're gonna do this. And they universally said, thumbs up, if you can do it this way, do it. And we embarked on that, and we ended up with a fantastic project, and there you go. And it's a P3 DBFOM. And we could have done it a little cheaper and not done the DBFOM, but we did, and now it's the building where the city's gonna get it back in 40 years, and it's gonna be at an 85% level. And if anything happens with the building, the contractor is stuck with it, an issue with that. And then also if there is a big earthquake, there's metrics on how soon we can get back in the building. Some we can get back in 24 hours, some 48 hours, some a little bit later, depending on the seismic issues and things like that. But it was a wonderful thing, and the council voted for it unanimously, and we went through 2 or 3 councils on this because it was a long time, and everybody supported it.
That's awesome. Yeah, well, I'm particularly glad because I was in the old city hall. So I'm glad that they were able to move forward with such a big project. It was also just after the great financial crisis. So there wasn't really a lot of options and support. But let's talk a little bit more about how do governments usually build infrastructure? Who usually pays for it? Because I hear all the time from city officials, well, we can get tax exempt financing. We can get money for cheaper than anybody else. Why didn't you just do that? Why didn't you get the cheapest money through a tax exempt bond financing?
Well, 2 things. One is, first off, back when we had redevelopment agencies, that's how city halls got built back before 2000, the year 2000. So all the new city halls before 2000, 2005, were all built with redevelopment agency dollars. Then, before redevelopment was abandoned, they changed redevelopment law to say you can't build city halls anymore. Redevelopment is for blight, it's for parks, it's for housing, it's not for city halls, it's not for municipal infrastructure. So that changed. So then if we wanted to do a building, we would do exactly what John said, but we had, honestly, our elected officials had they had no taste to go forward and do a bond issue, even if there's interest-free or anything like that. No interest, no taste for that. They wanted, again, as an elected official, I want to fix streets, I want to do community centers, I want to do low-income housing, I want to clean the beaches and the water. I'm not going to build a city hall, I'm not going to put debt on the voters for that. And we just couldn't do that. Smaller cities would do that. Maybe the cities, there's 88 cities in LA County, and most of the cities are, smaller than, 50,000 population, and those are the cities that might be able to do that, but the larger cities, it's tough.
Yeah, so then, from the same question to Jeff though, so who did pay for this? Because we now know how you built it, and we know there are a bunch of different partners involved, but where did the money, the $530 million, whose money was that? Where did that come from?
Yeah, well, it's, again, for the city to do it, that's right, you're gonna put all that on your balance sheet. You're just gonna go out and borrow the money, it's gonna show up as debt, and that's hard for the public and this council to digest, because even if you do have cost savings to offset it at the end of the day, it shows up as, new debt. This basically is like a lease structure. If you can think about the idea of kind of owning versus renting, now that's a bit over nuanced, because the city does own the property and it's a service contract, so there's no deed transfer and all that. But at the end of the day, the financing, just like if you were going to rent in a building, is paid for by somebody else. It's paid for by a private entity. So we raised private debt from a life insurance company, in this case Allianz. We used our own equity to invest as our plenary's equity to invest through our partners in the equity piece of it, and then we took and traded the old city hall. So we coughed up some money, passed the hat around, and everybody chipped in, and we came up with enough money to buy the old city hall. And so those things added up, and there's kind of a unique way to do it, which you could do within, again, a public-private partnership. You're not just going out and borrowing all the money, and we're reliant on the city making that lease payment, which is the same as they would have otherwise been paying out of their general fund.
Interesting. Okay, so there may be lots of different private capital sources, not just one. Like if the city was to issue a bond, or the government issues a bond, you maybe had multiple private investors. I guess the question then to Pat is, sorry, we're pushing it back and forth. So how did it work out? So you moved in, I guess everybody moved in 19. I remember that. How is it working out now? Because you're now renting from this guy.
That's true. That's true. The city rents, and that was what we were able to get our bond financing. It's a simple transaction. There's a construction loan that you guys had to get, and then we became the takeout loan. When we signed, we'll be your market rate tenant for 40 years with CPI increases every single year. Construction loan, takeout loan. And for me, it was the most successful thing I've ever been involved in. And I'll tell you, Long Beach has had ups and downs. It's kind of like the little engine that could. It's like right here, and then 2008 happened, and poof. And then COVID happened. But with this project right here, it was the single most heavy investment that the city invested in itself in like a generation. Like in the early 2000s, the city lost all aerospace. McDonnell Douglas, Boeing, all left. We also lost the Long Beach port. So it was dire times. And then when this project happened, when the development community saw that the city of Long Beach is going to invest $500 million to $1 billion in itself in the downtown, everybody just came out of the woodwork. And once we did that, once everybody saw the city's investing in itself, then everybody followed suit. So if you go through downtown Long Beach right now, it's going through a building boom right now. There's nothing but cranes in the sky. There's housing projects all over the place. It's a fantastic boon. And I believe in my heart of hearts, none of that ever would have happened had the city not invested in this project in the downtown. Additionally, had the city not done the library or not done the park as well, and also to get the port. The Port of Long Beach, they're a city department, but they don't report to the city manager. They report to their own board appointed by the mayor. And they're happy at the airport. They're at the Long Beach airport, and they're happy. They just spent $80 million on a building. And that was a tough conversation for me to go to the port director at the time and say, John Slinger, why don't you just come to City Hall and be part of our project. And he's, Pat, we just spent $60 million on this building and we like it. Why would I, just because you're asking, be part of this project and spend $200 million of the port's money to build this? And anyhow, we ended up doing it. See, here's what happened, honestly. There's two buildings there. One faces the ocean, one faces the city. Honestly, the city council wanted the ocean view, and right there at that minute, I said, "You guys get the ocean view. You're the port. The port should be looking over the port, and the city should be looking over the city." So that sealed that deal. My city council was not happy with me, but we got the port there, and that was a big deal. So the critical mass there.
All right,
It was so successful.
So this gets even more interesting. So you had to bring on roommates. You had to bring on roommates, and obviously the port was one big roommate. You brought in some other departments that maybe joined and started chipping in on the rent payment. So let's talk to the private side, because I know at Sunstone we have a lot of private investors who want to invest in public infrastructure, but they don't know how, and they don't know what the risks are. So let me ask the landlord now, who's managing the buildings, and from Plenary Edgemore's perspective, how is the city as a tenant, and how is that going, managing? Do they complain a lot, like you need to hang a picture on this wall, or my plumbing isn't working? How's that working out from a private sector side?
Yeah, they complain a lot. No, I'm just kidding. So a couple things. One, I know we're using this rent analogy, but I do want to set the record straight that the city owns the building, and they're going to continue to own it. When our contract expires, they'll own it. They'll get it back in 85% of new condition. So you can think of it as as almost like a lease purchase option or something. Like we don't own the building in perpetuity, and we don't want any tenant other than the city, because the city is government credit, and so from an investor standpoint, that's really easy to underwrite, and so that brings our cost of financing way down, and it brings the returns down, but it's super safe, right? You know that you're going to get that check every month as long as you do what you said you were going to do, which is provide a good solid building that they can go to work in. Something they didn't have before, right? As Pat mentioned, it's built above earthquake standards, so you don't have a pancake problem anymore. You also don't have a problem where your elevators don't work, or your HVAC system doesn't work, and like that little picture I flashed up there, we put in an underfloor air system, so when some person says they're cold over here, I can just pull a vent out of the floor and move it over there to the guy that's hot, and then it changes the airflow on the thing. Those types of things we thought about in advance and did, so that we can deal with all their needs and changes. You can move a cube around, you can reconfigure spaces. All of those things are relatively easy, and we put in really good modern systems that have great energy efficiency and that can provide those lower operating costs. But it's part of just bringing that team of resources to the deal that you don't otherwise have in the traditional method. Like if you were just to go out and raise the bonds and go finance it and say you're going to go build the building, you'd hire a smart architect and an engineer, and they'd walk around and they'd ask every department what they'd like, and the department would probably ask for more than maybe they need. And then they would design it to the best of their abilities, and then say, oh, it's too much money. So then they kind of parse back. They wouldn't do that underfloor air system. They wouldn't do some of the things that maybe save you operating dollars in the long term, but they save you dollars up front so you can hit your budget. And that happens all the time. And then 20 years later, you ask why the building's falling down. But if you change the paradigm and you say, what I need you to do is make sure my payment isn't any more than $12.6 million a year, then you're working to a different goal.
Yeah, well,
and you can bring all the resources from the private sector, right? So we've got teams of architects and engineers. We compete at different scopes of work. We were able to find different ways to compete ideas and people within more flexibility of the structure, which is one of the strengths, again, back to the P3 partnering principles, strength of the private sector. We're not as constrained as the public sector. Mm-hmm. Yes, they have cheaper financing, but the financing is because of their good credit. So we build a capital stack that really makes that pretty competitive with their financing, but we're able to bring the leverage of the private resources.
Well, so then let me flip it back to the public sector then. So Pat, you're the CEO. You're managing one of the biggest cities in the state of California, and now you're renting from or leasing from this private developer. We hear all the time that the private sector is just trying to make money, and they're gonna cut costs, and they're not gonna build you the building you want or provide the service you want, because they're just trying to make money for their investors. what was your actual experience? How did it work out? And what would you say to government officials who have these concerns?
It worked fantastic. This is a DBFOM, design, build, finance, operate, maintain. So one of the things we chose was to have the operate, maintain part go to Jeff's team. So we as a city, we're not maintaining City Hall. We're not fixing it on a day-to-day basis and all that. We have a crew, one of Jeff's team. What happened, real quickly, this existing City Hall was built in 1974. There's no reason it shouldn't have lasted. It should have lasted another 20 years. What happened, and this could be urban legend, but after Katrina, when this seismic guy went in, he found out that on the second floor of this 15-story building, that there was a strut that didn't fit, and somebody heated the strut to make it fit and bent it. And that happened, but it was at a critical point for the building, so the seismic guy said, that's your problem. That strut you can't fix, and that's what's gonna collapse, and the building's gonna fall down. And where's the contractor and the architect? They're gone, they're to the wind. So it's our problem, it's not anybody else's. Here now, they had to build this knowing that they're on the hook for this building for 40 years. If anything happens to this building in 40 years, it's your fault, you have to fix it. If something like that happened, you would be there. So also too, if it's going to succeed in an earthquake, it's not gonna collapse. Other things are happening. And two, for us, for cities, for recognizing cities during budget season, the first thing to go in a financial crisis is maintenance on a city hall, or maintenance on community centers, or fixing roofs at community centers and things like that. First thing to go. So if anybody had visited this facility before it was torn down, it was just tattered. I mean, it was like, you could just see years and years and years of deferred maintenance, and that was because the city allocated the money to go for more police, for more fire, for other things, for streets and stuff like that. And this money, we're not gonna allocate it to keep our city hall up and keep it looking good and redo the restrooms and all that stuff. But now, because of this operate, maintain, it's doing that. So Jeff and his team, they're doing that. They selected materials when it got built that are gonna last for 20 years or 30 years. And there's replacement schedules already that in 20 years or 30 years, this gets replaced or that gets replaced. And you're on the hook for that, the city's not. So I, as a city manager, don't have to worry about going to my city council and, hey, we need this for the city hall. And they say, yeah, Pat, I run to get my street fixed instead. And the city hall, the maintenance and that goes down. So I couldn't be more happy, and I know the successor, the city manager that's there today, he was involved in all this as well too. He couldn't be happier as well. And the city council as well, because they don't have to make those decisions. They're in a beautiful place, and they're not faced with these, Sophie's choice decisions. Is it police, is it fire, or is it fixing City Hall?
Yeah, and that's an interesting perspective, the risk transfer, that if you know you're gonna have to take care of it for the next 40 years, you might use better materials, you might use better equipment, especially if you know that any additional costs, you're gonna be on the hook for replacement. So what I want to do is ask anybody from the audience that either online or in person, if you have any questions. We have two experts. One, former CEO, city manager of one of the largest cities in the nation, and who's delivered a huge, really a generational project, and an expert in P3 development. Do you have any questions from the group, or can I ask a few more? We have a catch box, so you can use the microphone, we'll bring it around. But any questions about what you've heard today, or you're concerned about? Yes, sir.
I'm looking for my box.
Yes, sir.
No. So one of the questions I think that always comes up, and it's usually, what is the interest level or appetite for institutional capital participating, especially within the U.S., right? So there's, I think as a state of California employee, their money goes into, CalPERS, CalSTRS, major institutions. Those institutions are investing outside of the state, right? How, when the opportunities come up for them to invest in some of these public-private partnerships within the state of California, what would that actually look like from an investor point of view, as far as stability, return? Like, what are kind of the metrics they may be looking for that this deal already has built into the project?
Yeah, so there's a huge investor appetite because for this investing, it's infrastructure investment, and there's lots of things within that asset class, and as you pointed out, a number of them are international, and you're probably going to get a higher return if you are investing in the Ukraine, but then your stuff might get blown up. So like there's things like you got to worry about like that, whereas you don't have to worry about that as much in Long Beach. So just as a risk profile, right? And so you could say that we have a good appetite, but they also know that they're competing with the tax exempt financing and those bonds, and so there's just a trade-off there about where people get to from a returns perspective, and every deal is a little bit different, depending on where the market is at the time, of course, and also what the general risk profile is. But the city, to give you an idea of Long Beach, is paying us an availability payment. As I mentioned, they can have a direct rate of offset if the facility is not available, so that's the private equity risk, and that's taking that piece of it. But the only thing we ask of the city is that you don't conduct your business anywhere else. So if you move City Hall, it's a violation of their agreement. That's their only covenant. Otherwise, it's annual appropriations, right? So from a city perspective, they make us an availability payment on annual appropriations. From an investor perspective, they're like, that's not a big risk. We know the city of Long Beach is stable. They're AAA credit. They're not going anywhere, and they're not going to have a City Hall anywhere else other than in this building. So you feel pretty good about the idea that you're going to get that payment every month.
Very, very good. And well, as we wrap up, if there's any other questions, Pat, from your perspective, then to kind of close this out, how hard was it at the end of the day to take this risk? Like Jeff said, to commit to 40 years, have a private developer operator. How hard was that at the end of the day? How long did it take you and your city council, your board of directors, to approve to move forward with this agreement?
It was hard. This wasn't easy. First off, it's emotional because you've been told that this building, if it collapses, people are going to die, and the elected officials knew that. But it's like, wow, the people say that about buildings all the time. They didn't trust it, and again, there's a lot of needs in Long Beach besides the city hall. So it took a couple of years, 2-3 years to get going on that. Again, we just had to keep reminding elected officials that the seismic issue's there, and also too that it's not just us in the building. We have a lot of homeless population down below the building at that time, and anybody that, if the building collapsed, there'd be a lot of deaths of people in the park and things like that. So it took a couple of years, and once again, it all started with this courthouse. Once we studied the courthouse and understood the P3 formula in the courthouse, and then brought it to our guys, they said, there's a lot of trust here. I was the city manager for 7 years by the time I got the approval to do this. And the politicking was probably the toughest part, is knowing how to talk to the city council, the different elections. There's 9 elected officials district-wide. Some of the officials, are in North Long Beach, West Long Beach, East Long Beach. They have no idea, they're not anywhere near the downtown, their districts or their voters. And then you've got a citywide elected mayor, who's kind of a strong mayor, who wanted to make this happen as well. So that was the key. When we found out that we could do this without taxes, without a ballot measure, and use it with the exact same money that we have, we're using our existing budget, and we can make this happen. And we're not gonna, one of the things we did, we chose very, very early, thank you, Jeff, for your ideas too. Rather than take the library and take it down and rebuild it, we just flip-flopped it. So we had a park here and a library here. So we took the library and we built the new library where the park was, and then we could take down the old library, and we never had to move twice. Same thing with City Hall. City Hall, we ended up inheriting where the old courthouse was, so we could stay in City Hall while we built the new one, so we only had to move once. One of the biggest costs in projects like this is if you have to move twice. Imagine you've got a big tall building like this, you've got to find someplace to move for 1.5 years, and then you got to come back in the new building. So that saved us a lot of money, and that helped go with the council as well. But again, it was navigating this. Thank God I had 7 years in as a city manager in Long Beach. I understood the dynamics, I understood the culture in the community, the service clubs, the ports, the library folk, the parks folk, and was able to sell this and put it together in a small story where I could go out on the rubber chicken circuit and sell it. And the public unanimously said yes, and the council said yes too. And then the final thing that was tough is right when we're coming in for approval, we're having generational change in leadership in the city. It's 2014, so at 14 we have more changes in our elected officials than in a generation, more changes in the department heads in a generation, and I had the previous mayor, you know, he spent a lot of time on this, and before he leaves, he wants the council to approve it. But then I've got like 6 new council members coming in and a new mayor, and they're not gonna be appreciative if the guy on the way out stuck them with this deal. So I was able to like work with the new incoming mayor, and we worked with all the new council members for probably a 4-month, 5-month period. So they got a chance to own it, dig in the details, ask any questions they wanted, live and breathe this for 3 or 4 months. So they believed in it as much as I did, and it happened. But probably the biggest thing was just politically to make that happen, working with the city council to do this. And also, I got, you know, so much blind faith. It wasn't blind, but faith in Jeff and his team, watching what they did in the courthouse and recognizing that I'm secure. I'm not the finance guy, but I'm relaying a finance plan, but I believed in it because I saw it happen, and I'm reading with Jeff, you know, probably, you know, 2 times a week for like 3 years, you know, along with our finance director and all that.
All right, well, thank you very much to both Pat West and Jeff Fullerton for joining us today at the Sunstone stage for our P3 strategy series. We'll give them a round of applause, and hopefully you can stay for our Sunstone Connects events afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.